Who are these people? The children of Satan. Who is every person in the world who doesn't follow Jesus Christ? A child of Satan. We can see the power of the evil one in history, in the Bible, and in the world. That is always full of wars, murders, rapes, now the possibility of nuclear war. When we think of the last World War, the evil that the conquerors did, the Allies murdered 1.2 million German prisoners of war. The Russians came into Russia, the Russians came through from the east and murdered and raped women and children. The Americans, the Allies, came in from the west. They murdered and they raped wholesale women and children. There was a stream of women and children going to the doctors that they could find from the American soldiers. Nobody ever told us that. This is history. And when we think of the Japanese, we all heard how terrible they were, how cruel they were. Everything they did, what they did to prisoners of war. But nobody ever told us there were hardly any American or Australian prisoner of war camps. You know why? They killed all the Japs. Instead of taking them prisoner, if they took them prisoner, they'd shoot them in the back and kill them. That's history, brought out by a recent researcher, Satan. Then we think of the atomic bomb that was put upon Japan. And we think of the evil generals that were in our armies, MacArthur. The power of the evil one in nations. This began in the Garden of Eden, and it is Satan continuing today his work as prince of this world. In Genesis 3, we have these well-known words, how that God said to Eve, the fact that her descendant would bite the heel of Satan, but he would squash the head of Satan. And of course we all know that this refers to Christ, who was attacked by Satan, and it refers to Christ, who died on the cross and totally defeated Satan by crushing his head, he, the serpent. Total defeat for us. And when we look through the Old Testament, we see the work of Satan after the flood, after Noah's flood. And the power of Satan began in earnest through Nimrod in Babylon. Nimrod of the building of the Tower of Babel. And then later on, we see how Satan worked in relation to Abraham and Lot. Lot was deceived by satanic powers so much that his wife was turned into a pillar of salt. The whole world lies in the power of the evil one. The whole world. All people of all nations are children of one or the other. And I'm going to read this verse. I'm reading Logos translation of 1 John 3:10. By this, the children of God and the children of the devil are manifest. Two classes. the children of God and the children of the devil. Everyone who does not practice righteousness is not of God. So the children of God practice righteousness. The children of the devil do not. The whole world is divided into two classes, not Jew and Gentile. They're divided into the children of God and the children of the devil. Children of the devil. Now many today call a certain class of people Jews when they are not. And often the term Jew pertains to a certain clan, like the Rothschilds, and even some people who are not of similar beliefs and books that those similar to Rothschilds follow. The Kabbalah, for instance, are called Jews. Christians call God's people of the Old Testament Jews. Christians call present-day people living in Israel Jews. Those people call themselves Jews, but they don't want you to mention the word. If you mention the word, you're an anti-Semite, they say, which is totally ridiculous. But anyway, that's what they do. Jesus said to the Pharisees of Israel, "You are of your father the devil." He was just speaking to a certain portion of the human race. They were not the totality of the human race. They were the Pharisees. And where did the Pharisees obtain this term that Jesus used? In Babylon, through the Kabbalah. Now today, people speak of Ashkenazi Jews and Sephardic Jews. None of them is a descendant of Abraham, not one. All the descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob were gone in death and murder and judgment, except for a few who were Christians scattered around the mountains, and except for John the Apostle, who later passed away about 93 AD. And there may have been a few in his church in Ephesus. There are people who are called Jews today, whom many Christians recognize as Khazars, and whom Netanyahu recognizes as Khazars, and whom many so-called Jews recognize as Khazars. None of them is the descendant of Abraham. And a professor of linguistics in Tel Aviv University, whose books I possessed on the Sephardic and the Ashkenazi, said straight out, they are not the descendants of those people who were in Palestine at the time of Christ. Now, one reason is those who are there are Khazars, who have no genealogical connection with the Israelites of the days of Jesus. So let us think of this. Who are these people? The children of Satan. Who is every person in the world who doesn't follow Jesus Christ? A child of Satan. So the criteria of being evil and causing problems in the world is not that you're a Jew or a Khazar or a non-Jew or whatever. The criteria is you're a child of Satan because you do not know Jesus Christ. And the problem in the world and the church today is that we call Judaism as belonging to Moses, as belonging to the Bible. Judaism has no connection to the Mosaic law. Judaism has no connection to Israel in the Bible. Judaism has no connection to the Church of Jesus Christ in the New Testament. Everybody who is not of Christ is a seed of Satan. So who are the problem in the world? Not a people called Jews, as many would say. Not a people who are called the synagogue of Satan. We have a certain people who are worse. The seed of Satan, who are the children of Satan, because they know not Jesus Christ. Now we do have this, that is the problem in the world today, and it is the Kabbalah. And present-day Judaism follows the Kabbalah. Present-day Judaism belongs to the synagogues. Present-day Judaism belongs to those people who call themselves Jews. That's Judaism, and it has the Kabbalah. Now here's something very alarming. We who live in the West have had what we call the Reformation. Luther was the leader of it. He nails to the church in Wittenberg 72 articles against the Roman Catholic Church and Popery. 72, a number of the Kabbalah. Why 72? The problem, as I said, is Satanism, which is the deep worship of Satan. That includes occultism, black magic, and that has been used by the Khazars centuries before they became Judaistic, because they followed Judaism, the Judaism of the Pharisees, who obtained it from Babylon. It contains black magic, the occult, the deep worship of Satan. And we have the offshoots of the Kabbalah that is found in the Vedas of Hinduism, the Koran of Islam, and the senseless book produced of false Satanism doctrine in relation to the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Seventh-day Adventists through the Kabbalah. Now we have in the that which is called the Church, the Kabbalah that came through Ribera and La Conza. We have in the Church the Kabbalistic evil that came into the Church in the West through the daddy of them all, John Nelson Darby, all of Satan, including Calvin and his Presbyterianism. Luther partly followed the Kabbalah through the Rosicrucians and at the beginning he loved those people who at that time one could call Jews, but then he found out what they were like and wrote a book against them. Anybody who follows the Kabbalah follows homosexuality and pedophilia. Anybody. We have Hillsong that was founded by Frank Houston, a pedophile, but he didn't follow the Kabbalah as far as I know. We consider it disgusting. John Nelson Darby was worse, and so was Calvin. They were both homosexuals. They were both pedophiles. They followed the Kabbalah. And John Nelson Darby, in his writings, and I have said more than once that I downloaded the writings of John Nelson Darby a few years back, and I was so upset by them I threw them in the bin. No gospel. He quotes in his writings Theosophy and the Kabbalah, and mingles it with Bible instruction. They're in his books. You just have to buy them to find them. You wouldn't want to do it. That's how deceived we all have been. Calvin was the same. And as far as I know, Calvin did not quote Theosophy. But John Nelson Darby did. You couldn't expect John Nelson Darby to be any otherwise. After all, he belonged to the aristocracy of England. After all, he copied Ribera and Aconza, Kabbalists. And we were all deceived by it. The work of Satan, the curses on the people of God because of it. How many people did get saved and how many people did not get saved in the Presbyterian Church and in the Brethren? Well, I know they didn't get saved very often in the Presbyterian Church because I knew many of them. But the Calvinists did have some people who had enough of the gospel later on to write fairly good books. Then we think of our holy books, the King James Version, overseen by Sir Francis Bacon, who also was tinged with the Kabbalah. They all were. All through every person, every leader, everybody who came through the Renaissance was a Kabbalist. All the scientists were Kabbalists. John Newton was a Kabbalist. They were all Kabbalists, every one of them, and so was Sir Francis Bacon. And Sir Francis Bacon was in charge under evil King James I of the translation of the King James Version. Now we know why there are such errors, particularly in the King James Version Old Testament, overseen by a Kabbalist. He was placed in charge of the fledgling USA, and his idea was it was to be utopia. Where does utopia come from? Go back to the fallen angels and all those stories. So first it was England, almost totally taken over by the Kabbalistic views of Judaism to this day. Then it was USA to this day. Worse now in USA. Their government, their White House, is filled with homosexuals and pedophilia, and so were the past few presidents. And I'm quoting historical facts that I find in place after place. And it makes me wonder why the English-speaking, English-speaking, Germans speak German. They heralded the Reformation because it was a blessing in part. We got the liberty to read the Bible. We left Catholicism in England. Why English-speaking people? I'll tell you why. England was the only country ever since the true gospel was preached where some true aspect of the gospel began to be preached wholesale, particularly by Wesley and Whitfield. So who do you think hates the British? The same people of the snake. Then USA. And in particular in relation to England, look at all the missionaries that were sent out by England. And all the millions of converts to Jesus Christ throughout the world because of the English missionaries. Then think of USA. And all the wonderful partial revivals of religion according to some gospel that they have had in USA. Don't you think the snake hates them? And that is why we need to be aware of what has occurred throughout history and what is the problem. It all comes from Nimrod and Babylon, but basically it began in the Garden of Eden when Satan set out to be the opponent of God and the opponent of Jesus Christ and the opponent of believers, where he set out to have his seed. Those who do not follow righteousness, those who do not follow Jesus Christ, they are all the seed of Satan. The Lord give us understanding. Amen. Judaism has no connection to Israel in the Bible. Judaism has no connection to the Church of Jesus Christ in the New Testament.